To discuss this, I'm joined on the news by Public Affairs Analyst Ahmed Husaini. Thank you for your time on the news, Ahmed, and let's get straight to it. What is your stance on the recent calls by some state governors to pay a reduced minimum wage?
Hello, thank you. I think most of those governors, I agree with one part of the argument and I disagree with the other part. I agree with the part that says the state should be allowed to pay based on their ability to pay, but that should not be below the federal minimum wage. Because if you look at what's obtainable in the US, that we are always quick to give example of, usually the federal minimum wage is about $7.25, and states cannot go below that. So you can see states actually matching that, states like Alabama and other states like Washington, New York, and even California going as high as $16 per hour. So if states can be allowed to actually pay on the ability, but it should not go below the federal minimum wage. The federal minimum wage, I agree with the Labour Congress position, would be actually the floor, not the ceiling.
Also understand that some argue that the national minimum wage does not reflect the country's economic reality. How do you respond to this?
I think I don't agree with that because, I actually, if what the government is offering around 62,000 naira, per month is what the governors are claiming they cannot be able to match, then I don't agree that it is actually in a way inconsistent with our economic realities, because Nigerian workers want to see more action on the part of the ruling class, like what are they currently doing, to cut on their own expenditure. What kind of sacrifices are our leaders making in order to ensure that they are also keeping their own luxury and luxurious lifestyle in tandem with the economic reality of the country, because you cannot ask Nigerian workers who are actually earning or among at the lowest rung of the economic ladder, you cannot ask them to make sacrifices while the leadership continues to actually wallow in luxuries and profligacy and continue to enjoy all the perks of their offices without making any sacrifice. There are a lot of frivolous expenditures on the parts of the ruling class, buying the president a new jet, spending a lot of money constructing presidential or policies and all that. But then you are asking Nigerian workers to sacrifice. I don't agree with that. I don't think that's inconsistent with our economic reality. What is inconsistent with our economic reality is the tendency of the ruling class to actually ignore the suffering of the masses while continue to enjoy the luxuries of their offices.
Now, let's talk about steps that can be taken by the NLC to engage with state governments and other stakeholders to ensure that the implementation of a uniform national minimum wage. What do you think the NLC can further do to sort of push this?
The NLC does not have the capacity to actually enforce or impose minimum wage on the states. I think it's the federal government that somehow have the capacity, but also the federal government also will need, the backing of the National Assembly, because any unilateral action by the federal government to impose minimum wage on the state will actually be will actually be opposed or resisted by the government, by the state governments, and that means we will end up, having some litigation up to the Supreme Court. But if the presidency or the federal government can be able to actually co-opt or convince the National Assembly to make some legislation that can be binding to state government, then we were able to have some form of, conformity with the federal minimum wage, by the state governments. But anything other than that, the Labour Congress does not have that capacity. And it also depends on the state. There are states where labor agitations are actually intense, and the labor movement can be able to, actually exact some political prize on the government in power, but there are other states that the labor movement is merely the extension of the government in power, and they cannot be able to do anything to force the government to actually look after the welfare of Nigerian workers in their respective states.
All right, thank you for your time on the news, Ahmed Husaini.